Well, welcome to Save the Persecuted Christians. I want to read a verse from the Judeo-Christian text of the Hebrew Bible, the book of Proverbs, Proverbs 24:11. Rescue those being taken off to death, and save those stumbling toward slaughter. If you say, "But we didn't know about this," won't he who weighs hearts consider it? Won't he who protects your life know? Won't he repay a person according to his work? Well, that is an important imperative. Rescue. And that is the theme here. Save, rescue. Some translations actually say save. Save the persecuted Christians. We're here because there is a new epidemic. I have in my hand a headline from the Wall Street Journal. Christians in an epical shift are leaving the Middle East. Well, the reason they're leaving the Middle East is because they're being hunted down. They're being burned. They're being crucified. They are being drowned. They are being beheaded. Their throats are being slit. And we have assembled today a panel to talk about this new reality and what we must do, what you can do, what we can all do together to save the persecuted Christians. My name is Jerry Johnson. I'm president of NRB, that's National Religious Broadcasters. We're an association of Christian broadcasters. We have about 60 million listeners every week to our programs. We've been around for 75 years, and our mission points are advancing biblical truth, promoting media excellence, and defending free speech. And on that last point, we find ourselves here with you today because this is about the freedom to believe. It's very simple. The freedom to believe and the freedom to speak as well, your faith. 1 out of 10 Christians in the world today do not have the freedom to believe and to speak. Now, well, it's time we speak up for them. I've got a distinguished panel here with me representing Save the Persecuted Christians. We've got on your far left there, Suzanne Suzanne Scholte. Suzanne is one of the world's leading activists in North Korean human rights, and that's certainly been in the news and on our minds, so it's going to be fascinating, Suzanne, to hear you. She's president of the Defense Forum Foundation and chairman for the North Korea Freedom Coalition. She was awarded the 2008 Seoul Peace Prize, the 2010 Walter Judd Freedom Award, and the Volunteer Service Award from the President in 2014. Suzanne, we're grateful to have you. We'll hear from you in a few minutes. We've got to, just here to my right, Father Andre Mahanna. Father Andre is uniquely qualified to speak on the topic of ISIS and the Middle East, Europe, and the U.S. He grew up in war-torn Lebanon. At 10, his family escaped Christian massacre by living in caves in Mount Lebanon. He is president for the Apostolic Union of Clergy and director of the St. Rafka Mission of Hope and Mercy to Save the Christian Middle East. We're so glad you're with us, Father. We look forward to hearing you in a moment. And then, of course, to my left and your far right is Faith McDonnell. Faith is director for religious liberty programs and of the Church Alliance for a New Sudan. She's drafted legislation on religious persecution for the Episcopal Church and for the U.S. Congress. She writes and speaks on the subject of the persecuted church and has organized rallies and vigils for Sudan in front of the White House, the State Department, the Canadian Embassy, and the Sudanese Embassy. And she does work with a great group, IRD, the Institute for Religion and Democracy. We're so grateful you're here, Faith. We look forward to hearing from you in just a moment. Just to put this in context, I thought I'd make a few opening remarks. We have seen a huge shift, particularly in the Middle East, probably around 1910, 100 years ago. Population there overall around 13.6% Christian. We now, in 100 years, this is the cradle, the birthplace of Christianity. We're now down to 4%, maybe 4.2%. People are saying we're going to be down to 3% in less than 10 years. So this is an amazing... genocide is really the only word I know to use for this. If it was any other group, this is certainly the word that would be used. Because it's Christians, it's not so politically correct to use that term. But we're here today to say it's time to use that word. And it's time to act like it's happening, because it is happening. It's time to save the persecuted Christians. You know, in Syria, when the conflict started in 2011, we had about 2.5 million Christians. We are certainly under half of that now in Syria. In Iraq, you had about 1.5 million before 2003, and we're at 1/5 of that now. 1/5 of that now. It's incredible, maybe less than that. The list of countries that are the most dangerous to follow Jesus are North Korea, Afghanistan. And North Korea has been up there at number 1, but Afghanistan right now is really perhaps past them as the most dangerous place to be a believer. Somalia, Sudan, Pakistan, Ethiopia, Libya, Iraq, Yemen, Iran, India, Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, Syria, Uzbekistan, Egypt, Vietnam, Turkmenistan, Laos. And once you look at this list, you notice some themes. The big theme is the Islamist ideology, Sharia, the blasphemy codes, all that goes with that. There's certainly that as the main plot in these countries. There's a subplot, and this is the revival of radical Hinduism. We're showing a film next week at NRB called Stains with Stephen Baldwin. And this is about the missionary Stains in India who was burned alive in his van with his children by radical Hindus. And this current leader of India is talking about reviving Hindustan. He is glorying in all of this. And the radical Hindus are certainly an issue as well as the Islamists. And then we've got just good old communism. By that I mean evil, bad, wicked communism in places like North Korea, which absolutely cannot countenance a loyalty to any other lord than the supreme leader of the country, the secular leader. And so to pledge allegiance to the Lord, which Christians do, is anathema in North Korea. So we're going to hear about these challenges today. We've got some tremendous experts. You'll see at your seat this sheet, and you might want to just kind of take a look at it as we get going here. But this is patterned after the old Save Soviet Jewry campaign many years ago. Not jewelry, Jewry. And that is, during the Cold War, there was an awareness that the Jews were undergoing tremendous persecution in Russia, in Eastern Europe. And there was a quite effective campaign at churches and synagogues around America with signs and with banners. And this was actually a catalytic movement in the Cold War. And this campaign is built upon that kind of coalition. Christians, Jews, Protestants, Catholics, just people of goodwill, humanitarians. This is a human rights issue. It's not just a religious issue. This is a human rights issue. And to put up the banner, to wear the noon symbol, to speak up, to show up, to put up a sign. This is what we're asking people to do, to begin to do today. And this movement has already begun, but you're getting in on the ground floor if you're here today. And so let's get going with the other panelists. And we're just asking them to speak to what they've seen, what they've heard, what they know, and how you can make a difference. And hopefully we'll have a few moments Each of them will go about 10 minutes. We'll have a few moments at the end for some Q&A. So, Suzanne Scholte, start us off, if you will.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for being here and for showing your care and concern about this issue, and it's an honor to be with this distinguished panelist. I also want to give my appreciation and thanks to Frank Gaffney, who invited me to be here, and for the great work he's doing. This is, to me, the most important issue that's going on in the world right now, because this is really where the evil and good are in conflict, and where all the solutions to all the problems in the world come down to the role of religious freedom and the first freedoms that we have. So what I'm going to do, I have 10 minutes, and feel free to cut me off. Is there a timer? Because I could talk about this all day, but I'm going to focus on three very specific things. Why Christian persecution is so severe in North Korea. What about North Korea makes it number one on persecution? What the current situation is today, which should give you some hope, because like these other parts of the world where the church is Christians, the faith is being destroyed, I believe it's actually growing in North Korea, and what we should be doing, and what is the things that we should be doing in light of what's happening there. So first of all, why are Christians so uniquely targeted by the Kim regime? And you pointed it out, because he's their God. I believe that my personal view is this. Kim Il-sung, as a child, was raised in a Christian home. He saw the power of the Christian faith under the time when Korea was occupied by Japan. My personal belief is, because of that, he twisted our religious faith for his own purposes when he became the dictator. This is a fact. Half the signers of the Korean Declaration of Independence were Christians. Half the signers, even though the Christianity was very small percentage-wise. So it was the Christians in Korea that were standing up against the Japanese persecutors during the time of the occupation. And I believe that Kim Il-sung saw that, so what he did was he perverted our Holy Trinity. He used the power of the Christian faith for his own purposes. He created an unholy trinity of himself as God, his son Kim Jong-il as the Jesus figure, and Juche ideology as the Holy Spirit. This Juche ideology is something that's not really fully understood by many people, but this is the propaganda and the way that they brainwash their citizens in how they are fed this propaganda from childhood. All North Koreans are brainwashed to worship their dictator, to thank him for everything, including their daily meals. They actually say a prayer to the dictator. They have a creed that's modeled after the Apostles' Creed, that's to the dictatorship. And today, as an example, I mean, even their calendar, the Juche calendar, this is the calendar, this is when they was for the outside world audience, but it's actually the year, Juche year 107. I don't know another country in the world that has a different year, but it's the year of Juche 107, because that's based on when Kim Il-sung was born. But I also brought this is the latest textbook. This was smuggled out of North Korea, that the teachers are required to teach their students. This is the required guidebook for all teachers. You'll learn in this guidebook that this is the Kim Jong-un's history of revolution. You'll learn in this guidebook that Kim Jong-un learned how to train a horse when he was 6. He learned how to drive when he was 3. He drove an oversized truck when he was 10. And he gave a lecture to the entire Korean Workers' Party that was so brilliant when he was only 8 years old. All these episodes are described very vividly and include eyewitness testimony about these events that happened in Kim Jong-un's life. And it is laughable to us. It sounds so absurd. But North Koreans actually believe this because they're fed this steady propaganda from the childhood. And in addition to that, there's no music in North Korea except music that's to glorify the dictator. There's no literature except that which is meant to glorify the dictator. There's no movies, except the movies that are getting smuggled in illegally, that are available except those that are designed to glorify the dictator. And I want to just quote 2 defectors that we hosted to give you some idea of what this does to people's thinking. There's a woman named Hyun In-ae. She actually was one of the defectors that met with President Trump recently. She was an elite member of North Korean society. She actually lived in Pyongyang, and she taught philosophy. She was a philosophy teacher for 20 years. But she never heard of Aristotle, Confucius, or Locke. The only philosophy she taught was Marxism and Juche. And Marxism and Juche for 10 years, and then just Juche for 10 years. So for 20 years, that's what she taught. She was a perfectly happy member of the elite in Pyongyang, North Korea, and had all the privileges. But her husband got into trouble with the regime because he was visiting the Soviet Union as part of his work at the time of Glasnost. And the regime became concerned that he may have been exposed to Glasnost and different thinking. So he was sent to a political prisoner camp. She was not affected by this, but her sons were. They were afraid, and they fled the country. Interesting. 3 years her sons were in South Korea. They saved up enough money to go to China and to pay a broker to reach out to their mom, and they convinced their mom to come visit them in China. The mom came out to visit them in China, and the son said, "We're here to rescue you." And the mother didn't even want to go with them. It's just, we just can't understand that thinking, but that's how brainwashed they are. When her sons finally convinced her to leave, to be rescued, and she went to South Korea, and of course her whole attitude totally changed, her mind opened. But I told her, I said, "You should study real philosophy." And she said, "I'm afraid to study philosophy, and my thinking is limited. I don't have the capacity to think outside the framework." But that's just one example. Fortunately, she's gotten very involved in the North Korea defector movement, and she's been and she did go back to school, and she's studying, did go back to college in South Korea. But that's one example. I want to give you a more recent example of a young woman in her 20s who visited the United States last year. She was also elite, living in Pyongyang, and she said, when Kim Jong-il died, she and her family all thought they were going to die because their God died. So they thought that we were just, why are we still here? That's how much it affects the thinking of the people of North Korea. And one of the points this young lady made, Kim Ji-young said, she said, if you can break down the idealization of Kim Jong-un, it will change the hearts and minds of the people of North Korea. This is the point I made at the beginning. I believe the church is growing in North Korea, and the reason for that is that because of the famine and all these people fleeing North Korea, who were the people that went in to risk their lives to save these North Koreans? Christians. So Christianity, I believe, is growing in North Korea, and because they're being introduced to the gospel, because of the people that are helping them are the Christians. And I'm going to give you an example. There's a gentleman named Chae Gwang-hyuk who just testified last month in a congressional briefing on religious freedom. He became a Christian because he was exposed to the gospel, because he fled North Korea, and the Christians helped him. And he said when he went back to North Korea and started an underground church. One of the few people I know that had an underground church in North Korea and actually survived to live to tell the story. But he said, this is very interesting, and it goes back to the point I made at the beginning. He said when they were studying the Bible, they found out that the Juche ideology was the exact replication of the Bible, and it was very easy for them to understand the one true God and to accept Christianity. And it was easy for him to convert other North Koreans to become believers. So in light of what's happening today, I believe that there's an underground church that would remain, that was never vanquished from the Kim Il-sung when he was founding North Korea. But there's also a growing church because of the exposure from people escaping and going back. So I'm going to just make a couple quick points about what are the things that we should be doing today. First of all, we have to keep human rights at the forefront. What Donald Trump has done recently is brilliant, because we have to show people that we care about them. We have to talk about the human rights, the suffering of the people of North Korea by focusing on North Korea, their human rights tragedy that's occurring there. Dr. Thomas Belkey, who also testified at this congressional briefing recently, he literally wrote the book on Juche. He said that during this congressional briefing that Trump mocking Kim Jong-un, calling him Rocket Man, he said was both counterintuitive and brilliant, because he was mocking their God. And it has a destabilizing impact on the regime because he's openly mocking their God. So it's really important right now, one of the most important things we can do today, because of the escalating threats from the Kim regime, is to communicate to the North Korean people that we care about them. That the United States wants for the people of North Korea to have the same freedom and human rights that the people of South Korea and America enjoy. And in fact, our friendship with South Korea and the freedoms they have is what's propelled them to be such a prosperous nation. So speaking the truth and emphasizing the situation facing the people of North Korea is critical. Second thing is the most important thing, and this is, I'm very passionate about this, we've got to give the North Koreans the support to do this work, to reach out to people in North Korea. It's the North Koreans that have escaped, that are on the front lines of the rescue movement. They're rescuing people. They're doing the radio broadcasting. They're doing the balloon launches. They're smuggling in. They've designed a cell phone that looks like the North Korean cell phone that's actually a shortwave radio. They're doing amazing stuff. They know how to get information in. They know what the message should be because they escaped from that from that country, and this is their homeland. We see the pictures of the goose-stepping soldiers and the people fawning in front of the statues and crying, and we think there's no hope. But actually, it is a fact that it's the women of North Korea that created the capitalist system. That is why people are surviving today. It's the women of North Korea trying to feed their children and their husbands that created the market system. When the Sungmun class, when the public distribution system broke down in North Korea, it's the women that created that system. And the regime tried again and again and again to try to control it, and they finally gave up. And that's why people are surviving today, because of capitalism. Also, it's the North Koreans that, just to give you an example, that are doing the radio broadcasting. We have a program called Free North Korea Radio, and I know Frank's let me talk about this on his radio program, that's founded by Kim Sung-min, who was a captain in the North Korean army who escaped. It's broadcasting every day into North Korea on its own, and we have a partnership with American churches and Korean American churches who are supporting the shortwave transmission. It's a partnership between North Korean defectors who create the programming and American Christians that pay for the shortwave transmission. And through North Korea, through Free North Korea Radio, we're actually broadcasting in right now, as we speak, messages from members of Congress about the new year, because Solel, their new year started on Friday. So we've collected messages from members of Congress that we're broadcasting to communicate to people in North Korea that American leaders really care about them. And I want to tell you that something incredible happened last year. We started this program several years ago. The North Korean defectors came for North Korea Freedom Week with 3 portraits that had been smuggled out of Pyongyang, the capital of North Korea. These are the most beautiful things I've ever seen. They were of Ted Cruz, Chris Smith, and Ed Royce. And what do those 3 men have in common? They've been participating in this program and sending messages to North Korea. These messages came out, hand-woven silk. They shimmered. They were absolutely beautiful. They came out with the message, my brother and I spent 3 months making these portraits for the members of Congress who sent these messages. Tell them there's people that still have hope, that are living in a dark place. It was amazing. But if these 2 brothers had been caught, they would have been killed. But that's the power of it.
So. Time's up.
Okay.
That was a great story. A great way to end.
Awesome
next.
Way to end.
So that was Suzanne Scholte. If you came in late, and if there's 1 or 2 seats left, kind of make them obvious to people, because we have folks coming in and standing at the back. Now we go to Father Andre Mahanna. Father Mahanna, please speak to us.
Thank you so very much, Jerry. Thank you, Frank, for this beautiful time. I want to call my time with you as the prayer of the cave, because I cannot believe I am here. I cannot believe I am an American citizen. I cannot believe that one night in 1985 happened, that I survived it, and God answered this prayer to be with you. I'm happy to see young people. I was 12 years old when I left home and went to the monastery. I was about 8 years old when I had to live in a Phoenician tomb underground, where my game was with many children to run deeper in a cave, taking a little candle, and then keep following that candle until it dims. Then we have to stop, knowing that we may no longer be able to breathe. And when in this last May, I was able to be graced to be one of the religious figures that President Trump invited at the day of the signing of the Executive Act on Religious Freedom. I told him when he called me over, I said, can you believe from the cave to the rose garden? And today, this feeling is even greater. Being in the company of leaders and researchers and people of prayer, and especially younger people with you here, it makes me feel consoled. It makes me feel happy. But it makes me worry about you and worry about the future of this nation. And this is where I think I lay the context of what we're going to speak about in the next 10 minutes. Now you can start counting about ISIS. About ISIS and what can I bring to the table. First of all, we want to understand, I have the story to tell about the ISIS is a perfect product of a perfect evil. You know, ISIS has long-earned roots, whether within the conquest spirit, within, I would say, Sharia supremacy, political Islam, from the 7th century onward. And you just came new to the scene, but this has been the daily bread of Christians, of Jews, of minorities in the Middle East, and everywhere the political type of supremacy conquered. We had to live under their law of tolerance. And of course, the law of tolerance, it means slow death, basically, or no survival at all. So today, the first point I want to make, Christianity in a word, is it persecuted or is it forgotten? When it is persecuted, it means the numbers are very, very, very endangered. One, as Jerry said, like in the Middle East now, it's great to prove. If they are forgotten, it means two consequences. One, millions of people are to die, but there is no facts to gather information about them. Two, they want us to be forgetting them, because the minute we remembered them in our policies as United States, unfortunately, it ended up firing back against them, and they bore grave consequences, and that's dangerous. CPAC, a call to action, is important that we change this around. Very important that we stand by these people. Let them get up and let them know that there is a great nation that supports them and is ready to defend them. How? In the Bible, in a prayer, in support. Do all mechanisms that are legal and that are possible in our hands. We don't have to go and boast and be ferocious with iron and fire. No, there's many things we can do, and we have a lot of smart diplomats and smart agencies in America. They can do such a great job. And the second point, it is important to show the connection between the Christian persecution going on in the world and why we in America must care about it here at home. If we don't care or not fight against the persecution / genocide, as it was called, and it is called genocide against Christians and other minorities in the world abroad, how are we going to be prepared to fight to protect our own freedom here in the United States of America? We can no longer be lazy. If we don't understand that this is an attack against our nation, we must understand it's a complex attack against this nation. See, when our nation was being formed and founded in 1789, you had the three movements happening consecutively in the world that formed ISIS. I don't forget to make my points and finish them. I just describe a little bit more in the story. The first point, the French Revolution. We just heard the story of a crumbs in the news. You know, there is a crumb issue that happened during the French Revolution, and you all know that story of a crumb, the bread, let the people eat the biscuit. Today is a flip. The crumbs of the United States are going to turn to grace, because it's the only remaining hope to save those people in the world. We do not want it to become the last fall. The French Revolution produced secularism in Europe. Europe hated the church. Protestants and Catholics did a great job not witnessing to the gospel, did a great job killing each other, and then they produced a massive amount of war in all of Europe for 200 years. That was crowned by two major wars, 1914 and the 1939 war, leaving the world with over 220 million people dead. Is this the gift that Christianity brought to the world? So America was made during that time, and we had a very unique qualified president and very unique qualified pope who tried to make sense of this at the end of the 20th century. Pope John Paul II and Ronald Reagan. And in CPAC, the second call to action is to take after the legacy of these two people and utilize their legacy in order to defend our religious freedom by taking action in protecting the Christian persecuted. And the third point I want to make, see, religious freedom being as a First Amendment shows that the founding fathers knew in their great wisdom that man had to be able to answer to an authority higher than the government. They knew they were limited. They formed a humble nation before God, so it does great work before other nations. And this is really what makes America a great nation. And therefore, we acknowledge that freedom is a gift that comes to God, and it is our responsibility to maintain. Just look around on the stories of nations who do not respect or hate or reject God and all His faithful. Look around at the map of shrinking that Jerry spoke about in the beginning when he made the opening remarks. Today, Christianity is on a run in the world. Today, Christianity is not only a shrinking religion, it's a hated religion. There is discrimination against Christians. And in such a way, we as Americans not only must care, but must be afraid because we are the target that is going to be hated. Because no way we can deny our identity being founded on a Bible and a Constitution, being founded on communities that came from all over the world to make in this new land a place for home and for peace. In a story of ISIS, the demolishing of manuscripts and houses of worship, tabernacles, peeing on documents of the Bible, destroying every tomb of a prophet, destroying statues and old arts. You know, it's not only a human right issue. It's not only a persecution that is religious by its nature issue. It's an active harm against civilization of a humanity altogether. An entire patrimoine that was left to us from the Judeo-Christian times is being burned. Every civilization that came and was a part of the Bible, if you notice, both Old and New Testament, is being attacked by ISIS. The map of ISIS is like a worldwide web that is going around and is targeting every race, every language, every human type of civilization or education system that has to do by telling the story of Judeo-Christian principles, the faith in God, and Jesus Christ as a Savior and Lord. And coming down to it, when you see this nun pin, the Arabic adjective of Nasara or Nasreen, that we encourage everybody today before you leave, make this be the talk of the town. This nationwide campaign that we are running with Center for Security for America and the Coalition of Faith Leaders for America, make it the talk of the town. Go tell these people, we must care. We must care because which one is better? You want your child to be raped in front of a mother and being told, I'm doing you a favor? I'm letting your child go to heaven that way? Do you want to see the stories happening at land when they take a child directly out of the mother's womb and they put him in a slaughter machine and they put him in a pasta making machine or in a meat machine and they crumble him down, they smash him? Why do these things have to happen? And when 225 million Christians are persecuted in the world, and Americans still do not know about it, what does that tell you about America? Make my point. I am afraid that we do not know what America is all about anymore. And CPAC is the perfect platform to completely change this around and turn it around.
Here, here. That's good. Right. We got to move on. That's good. Okay. So now we'll hear from Faith McDonnell.
All right. Thank you, Jerry. Father Mahanna spoke about going from the cave to the rose garden. I have a friend from South Sudan who actually wrote a book called From the Bush to Bush. He was a fighter in the bush, and he met President Bush. So that was the title of his book, and I can show it to you if you don't believe me. But thank you so much for having me here, and thank you all for being here, really. I mean, just thank you from the bottom of my heart. You are defying the odds because we see that so many people are indifferent to the persecuted church. And there were other things you could have been here going to. You could have gone out to Peri Peri and had some chicken, but you chose to come here and hear a subject that's really not all that comfortable to hear. And I'm Irish, so I make it less comfortable. I like to inflict guilt. So, and I'm glad the room is full, and I just kept going like that, and that's going to be on video, but who cares? But telling people, come in, we're glad the room is full. We're glad there's people here. Tell your friends, too, to get involved, and that there's all generations here. I'm just so excited about that. I want to talk to you, I could talk to you about what I've been doing for the last 24 years, working in advocacy for persecuted Christians around the world, working with Suzanne, stomping around the Chinese embassy, trying to see the Chinese take a letter from us about the North Korean refugees that they keep sending back to North Korea, and they would keep pushing the letter under the door, and they'd keep pushing it back to us. It was really comical, but they don't want to have anything to do with it. Persecution in China itself, persecution, as Jerry was talking about, in the Islamic world. I have focused most of my time on Sudan and South Sudan, as well as places like Nigeria. Do you know that there's more Anglicans in Nigeria than there are anywhere else in the world? I'm an Anglican, recently, from the Episcopal Church to the Anglican Church. Before that, the Salvation Army, so I've really done a circle. But yeah, the church is strong in Africa. It's really the hope of the church, but we need to be their hope. We really need to come together for the church around the world. So I'm not going to deal with statistics and things right now. What I want to deal with is the church in the West and what we can do to change the attitude of Christians in the West. I think there's a number of reasons why American Christians aren't helping as much as they should. In one thing they're not doing is impacting the nation's foreign policy enough. We have seen some changes, thanks be to God, but we need more. But I think that there are a couple of reasons. Even with all the internet resources that we have now, some people are still clueless. They just really don't know the breadth and the severity of persecution of millions of their fellow Christians in the global church. And those words, fellow Christians. And it's a global church. We're not just a church in the United States. We are a global church, and we have brothers and sisters, and that needs to be emphasized over and over. Secondly, Christians and everyone else are easily distracted by that same internet that they could go on and look up SaveThePersecutedChristians.org or look up organizations that have information about persecution, but instead, they're looking at the latest thing on the internet, media bombardment that's sensational or sensual, and forgetting about their brothers and sisters that are dying. Third, many Christians are focused on their own spiritual growth. It's God and me. It's how can I improve my spiritual life? How can I find, I'm going to get really mean here. How can my self-image be improved, so that I really believe that God loves me? Well, ask the people that are being crucified right now in the Middle East. Ask the people in North Korea who are facing the firing squad with pebbles in their mouths so that they can't complain about the Kim Jong-il regime or cry out. Ask the people in Sudan who just had their church bulldozed last week. Does God love them? They know that, and we need to get it through our heads. Yes, God loves us. Let's get on with doing what we're supposed to do. And we focus on our own families and our own churches. I came out of this big brouhaha in the Episcopal Church, and we were pretty focused on, oh dear, we're losing our church property. I can't even hang a banner in my church because we're meeting in an elementary school. But it's nothing compared to what our brothers and sisters are experiencing. And for us, it was a blessing because the Anglicans in Africa took us in. And for us, that was the way we started to realize, what? It's bigger than us. This is a worldwide body, and we're part of it, and we're really glad to be part of it. If for no other reason you want to get involved with Save the Persecuted Christians, use a selfish reason. It's really awesome, you know, to get to know these people, to hear what God has done for them, to pray and see God answer prayer. You know, that's really a blast to actually see the answers to your prayers in flesh and blood. And, you know, we also worry about the threats on our own freedom of religion in America. I worry about that too, but I do roll my eyes when somebody says, well, we're being persecuted in America too, because I'll say to them, have you been disemboweled lately? So we need to realize what persecution is. And then the fourth reason, American churches are not united. The churches don't speak with the authority of the one body of Christ. And regretfully, all Christians don't have the same message, too. We have a problem within the churches in America. Some churches, not even who have a theological problem with issues, but they have decided that in order to reach out to, for instance, the Muslim community, they can't say anything bad about Islam. But we have to be truthful. You know, we do need to reach out, and that's what we do, but we cannot forget that Jesus said, love your enemy. He didn't say, love the person that you pretend is your friend. He said, love your enemy. He knew who were the enemies of the Church of Christ, and he said, love them. And that's really a lot better than being in denial and saying, you know, oh, they're not really my enemy. But saying, yeah, I love them even though they're killing us is a much bigger statement. And really reflects the love of Christ.
Okay,
so,
we should
am I done?
sum up.
Okay,
Yes.
I'm summing up right now. This should be part of the DNA of every church in America. And if it's not, you know, we talk about nurture versus nature in different issues. Well, this should be one of those issues. If it's not the nature of churches to be concerned about their fellow believers, then we've got to nurture it into them. We need to hang these banners in every church in America. You need to talk to your friends and your relatives, encourage your pastor, and that's it. Thanks.
So we might have a moment here for questions, but I want to reiterate a practical word here. Okay, so you've got this sheet in front of you, and I'm thinking, what can you do? And some of you belong to churches or denominations. I'm with the NRB, the National Religious Broadcasters. In the last 2 years, we've passed resolutions, and I want you to hear just a brief line from each one. Perhaps your church, your synagogue, your denomination, you could introduce this kind of resolution. In 2016, quote, NRB encourages the U.S. government to advocate to the international community the principles of the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution and to urge the adoption of similar standards in the rest of the world. NRB further urges the U.S. to be loud and lucid in its condemnation of attacks on Christians and other religious minorities overseas. You send that to the White House. You send that to the Congress. You send it to the committees. You send that to the State Department. This year, our resolution read this: NRB members and their constituents will urge the United States to take decisive action in defense of Christians threatened by genocide. So get your Sunday school class, your church, your denomination, your synagogue to do something, to make a statement. Send it to the editor of your local paper. If you look at this sheet right here, you'll see some practical solutions. One, endorse the movement. Go to the website and add your name to the list. I mean, that's something everyone can do. You might say, well, my church doesn't agree. Well, you can sign it. Do that, okay? Number two, help us build momentum going into Easter. Get one of these posters, get these pens, and be part of the solution. And it would be a great witness if we really rallied at Easter for this cause. Number three, register at the information site so you'll know when is the next gathering, when is the next press conference, how can I get engaged, involved. You know, wear one of these pens. I want to remind you once again, I want to sort of conclude these thoughts where we began, and that is the command in the Hebrew Scriptures from Proverbs 24:11, rescue those being taken off to death. Save those stumbling toward the slaughter. If you say, but we didn't know about this, won't he who weighs hearts consider it? Won't he who protects your life know? Won't he repay a person according to his work? So this really is the word of the Lord. It's the challenge. It's the mandate. So I want to thank you for coming. We're not done yet. We've got a few more minutes. But do you have a question? Do you have a speech to give? No. But usually we get that with a question. But we've got a couple of minutes. Maybe some of you that have been involved would like to add a point. Yes, in the back.
Sir, actually, I want to direct this to Scholte. Recent issue of Asian affairs about North Korea. The iron hand of the kings is beginning to rust. People are openly contemptuous of the government. Soldiers are stealing food. And from that poor fellow who got across the border, they're not very healthy either. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. No, you're absolutely right. And I think one of the big concerns we have right now is that we're really at the point where the population of North Korea is so much more informed than ever before. I like to say that Kim Jong-un's North Korea is not the North Korea of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il, because there's so much more information that has gotten into that country. They're so much more informed. They know they're being lied to. One of the concerns that we have, though, is that what's happening with South Korea, that the president of South Korea, they seem to be turning their backs on the people of North Korea. But I think right now we are at a critical point, because if you are an elite in North Korea, you wake up every morning with a choice: be loyal to that regime or be hauled off and murdered, and with your entire family members. They have to think that every morning. So what we should be communicating very strongly is that our problem is with the dictatorship, and that we would want to work with the elites in North Korea to transform that country and send a very strong message, and work with the defectors to get that message across, because the North Korean defectors are from every level of society, from average citizens to people that have served in the military, to people who have served in the elites, and they are doing this. They're communicating to people there, and they're doing it, as they say, that's their brothers and sisters. That's their homeland. So I think that that's something that we're not paying attention to, is what we could be doing through those defectors and getting information and reaching out to people in North Korea. But you're absolutely right. Things have changed a lot internally, but that the grip of that regime, that's why you saw so many purges and so many deaths by Kim Jong-un, including his half-brother and his uncle, because there is some resistance there. And we should be doing everything we can to make things change.
Now the question. Yes.
As a Catholic, former Catholic, I am very disappointed in the Pope and where he stands and some of his positions. And if we could eliminate political correctness from the answer, I would appreciate some comments on what your thoughts are about the Pope and what his position is, with, I see, a silence about the persecution of the Christians.
Would you like to speak to that issue?
I'm glad I'm an Anglican.
Pass. It's fine.
I will not wash my hands, definitely. I met with Pope Francis. See, there is Pope Francis and the propaganda of what the media, it's a part of the fake news, basically, a lot of times. And I invite us to discern all of that versus the real actions he takes. Sometimes, in order to defend weak lives in the world, remember, you're talking about only on the Catholic side, you have over 1.5 billion, up to 2, most of them living in the most dangerous areas where Christianity is not even protected. In fact, 80% of the persecuted Christians in the world are Catholics. And over 90,000 a year, they are killed because of their faith. This is by itself is a double-edged sword for the Holy Father to be able to speak about it loudly. I think it comes back to the same point. Give me a strong nation, like in the Bible, there was a king and a prophet. That's why I said intentionally to answer this without entering into the dilemma of what Pope Francis is reasoning and why he's speaking the way he's speaking. I think Pope Francis is lacking a Christian nation so he can take better action. Until then, I would rather not interpret his moves, but I know he's acting in prudence. But I have tons of answers and facts in my hands that he's been taking care. Like if you go to our website, savechristianmiddleeast.org, you will see every move in the history of his papacy that Pope Francis took. But in somehow these actions don't resonate, they don't make it to the media and somehow, and they end up being used for propaganda. And I think the election of President Trump and Pope Francis, and somehow somebody devilish wanted to put them apart from one another. And part of my presence here is to bring them back together through CPAC and other agencies. This Pope and our President must, and it's the only way to solve this problem, work together.
Can I ask another question?
Yes, ma'am.
As you know, the Holy Father has opened up the Vatican to imams and has had prayers, Islamic prayers.
In the garden, yes.
And understanding, if you know anything about the Quran, I mean, it's very clear that that according to the Quran is stating a claim. And I would just like your take on that. And
It's our last question. That's good.
I was around for that prayer, actually. And I am in charge of the ecumenical dialogue, which is Christian-Christian dialogue, and the interfaith dialogue. And I did write a paper to the Holy Father, and I submitted it to Cardinal Jean-Louis Tauran, who's in charge of that office. I said, close that office. And I was very bold about it. I said, Your Eminence, we have been co-opted, and the Sharia supremacists took over every interreligious council. And I was very sincere. I said it as a child of a church who cares for the church. But it's been in a work to review and reform our ecumenical approach. Stop killing me first, then I will pray with you. I want to love you. You know.
Okay, so look at the brochure. Remember the title, Save the Persecuted Christians. The old question, if not this, what? If not now, when? If not you, who? Let's go do it. Thank you so much.
Amen.